Hello everyone. The holidays are fast approaching, and with the holiday season comes some of our favorite holiday plants. Amaryllis and amaryllis bulbs are one of my favorite holidays flowers. And today we are going to talk about how you make a kokedama with an amaryllis bulb. So a kokedama is a Japanese art. It literally translates to a moss ball. So what we're going to do is basically, instead of a pot, we're going to plant our amaryllis bulb inside of this moss ball. You know, one of the most popular trends over the last couple years has been those amaryllis bulbs that have been dipped in wax. And while they're pretty and I could use them as a centerpiece on the table without having the space taken up by a pot, they usually only last for one season because the roots can't grow through that wax. So I really like this kokedama idea because I can take the twine off, remove the moss, and I can plant this in a regular pot once the season is over and move this plant outside. So this is going to last longer than those wax bulbs. Unfortunately, because it's not in a pot, our blooms may not last quite as long as they would if we were planting them traditionally, but they're still going to be really cool and they're still going to be a very nice centerpiece. So to do our kokedamas, first thing we need to do is get some sheet moss and soak it in water. You can use different types of moss. I have found sheet moss simply works better because it's in bigger pieces, so it's easier for me to handle. But you could use sphagnum moss, you could use Spanish moss, whichever one that you prefer. Some people might like the look of Spanish moss, but for today we're just going to use some sheet moss. The next thing that we need is our potting soil. So I have taken a regular potting soil and added some additional perlite as my base. And then I mixed that about 2/3 that potting soil and about 1/3 a cactus or a succulent type of soil. You can also use a bonsai soil. If you don't have either of those, dry kitty litter that's made out of clay works really well. Obviously, we need our amaryllis bulb. This is a variety called Cherry Nymph. This is going to be a double red variety, so I'm really looking forward. This is a new one for me. And we also need something to tie our moss on. I am using this jute twine. You can use silver wire, you can use fishing line if you really don't want to see the lines or your tying material like you can on this one. If you're going to leave something in a kokedama long term, they recommend the catgut that you use for sutures. You can buy that locally at other stores. But I have all my supplies here, so let's get started. So one of the first things we did, we soaked this up. We also need to get our potting soil wet, and we want it ultimately to be damp, but not wringing water when you squeeze it. So I've done a little bit of this. Now this is the hardest part of the kokedama for me. You need to compress and squish the soil to form a really tight ball, because we don't want our soil to fall apart. Now, if you have arthritis or your hands can't squeeze it as tight, you can start with your soil here and simply pack it around the roots of the bulb. That will work okay, especially for a short-term kokedama. For me, I do kind of a mixture. I start here and then I squish it up and get this really tight ball. You can see how it sticks together. I've got a little bit of water coming off. And then I'm going to bring it over here and crack it in half. It's going to come out and lay us over. I'm going to take my amaryllis bulb and stick it kind of in the middle and bring the soil in around those roots. Now, there's not a ton of soil around these roots, but this is only short term, so that's going to be okay. I'm going to grab just a little bit more so I can add some more soil to this back side because there's less back here than the other pieces. I'm going to move this over so I can kind of slide my moss to the front. And I'm going to pull my moss up, and ultimately we want to cover the entire bulb. Now don't pull too tight on your moss, otherwise it will rip. So we're going to pull it up until we've got fairly good coverage around our bulb. So there's still just a little bit showing up top, but that's okay. And I'm now going to take my twine, and I have found that if I have a longer piece of twine for my first wrap, and I bring it around so I can keep this moss pulled up fairly tight before I really worry about the bottom, that has worked best for me. Then I'm going to pull, kind of tie it with the other twine, wrap the bottom, and you really want to get this so your moss is held on tight. We do not want our moss to fall off, which is actually kind of what happened with my first one. So I'm just going to keep wrapping. I know my twine fell to the bottom, but that's okay. So we're just going to keep pulling it tight. Keep looking, making sure that there's no loose areas. I see there's one there that I've got to come back and get. So we're going to pull the twine there. This is looking really pretty darn good. I'm going to pull one more there. And then I have this end right here. This is where I started. And I'm going to use this to tie it off. And once I get it tied off the first time, I'll trim this end. Make sure it's really tight. Tie this again. I'll take care of these little ends. Now if you want to, I've got some long pieces sticking out. I could trim those back, but I kind of like the natural look. It's really your personal preference. Now when I go to water this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set it in a container of water for 5 to 10 minutes, maybe, as the most. I don't want to get too much moisture up towards the top because I don't want to rot the top of the bulb. Remember, if we plant an amaryllis, we'll leave about 1/3 to 2/3, half of that up above the soil. So this is my Kokedama. Again, I'm gonna soak him in water periodically when he starts to get dry. This one should start to bloom in about 6 to 8 weeks after I've planted him. But if you have any questions, this is a wonderful project. It's really easy and fairly inexpensive. And it's something that you can do with about any houseplant you have around the house. But I'm gonna do it with Amaryllis. So I hope everyone has a happy holidays, and I can't wait to see what you do with your Kokedama. Happy growing!